I mean, it's too early to tell, but I can definitely see a lot of people questioning living in Toronto because the cost is just getting out of hand.
It's Rayissa and Ramiro with Sutton Group Old Mill, and we're back. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everybody. 2024 has arrived.
Can't believe it. 2023 was a blur, total blur, passing through quickly, and the market's still moving.
Yeah, there's always things happening, and this is a part of real estate that we don't talk about a lot. But I remember from training back in 2007, studying for real estate, that one of the so the stat 70% or so of all real estate transactions are what we consider a negative thing, which would be people pass away, so you have estate sales. Unfortunately, people get divorced, which is a negative thing, right? People lose their jobs. So there's actually a lot of negative things that prompt real estate transactions. It's not all happy. We need a bigger house. We have a bigger family. Like definitely that is part of it, but the larger portion is negative type of transactions, if you can say it that way.
So let's just jump right into it. Speaking of the negative,
Mm,
taxes. Toronto
yeah.
taxes, Olivia Chow, they just announced 10.2%, I
Yeah,
think.
10.5%. Well, it's
10.5.
proposed.
Yeah.
Obviously, it didn't happen yet, but yeah, they're proposing 10.5% increase.
So can you imagine? So if your taxes are $4,000 for the year, right, you're going to be paying an extra over 400
400.
dollars.
Yeah.
So it's an extra dollar a day, which if the cost of living now with everything so high, that could make or break it for someone.
Yeah, I think for a lot of, well, the key thing is for, once again, that older generation who have been living in the house now for 20, 30 years. They're on a fixed income,
Yeah.
and everything, the cost of groceries, your insurance, just everything has been going up, 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 up. And for some of these people, it's gonna be a pinch. And I believe you just mentioned as well, according to the article, that if the feds don't figure out this whole
With the refugee,
the
yeah, the housing
refugee
crisis.
migrant crisis, it could be up to 16.5%
I know.
increase.
I can't even, and especially with some of the seniors that are holding on to larger homes, their taxes are not 4,000. Their taxes are at 10 or 12,000 if they're living on the Kingsway or they're living in Rosedale. So adding on 16% increase to that, that is significant amount of money.
I mean, listen, even here in Etobicoke, you live in Princess Margaret area,
Yep.
right? Princess Anne Manor. You already have a
Yeah.
12,000, right? So yeah, it's a bitter pill to swallow for a bit about everybody.
And do you think we're going to have more of these kind of quote unquote distressed sales, but now it's going to be because the taxes are too high that people are going to start reevaluating to say, hey, maybe we need to sell and downsize because maybe the taxes are going to be something that we don't want to spend extra money on.
I mean, it's too early to tell, but I can definitely see a lot of people questioning living in Toronto because the cost is just getting out of hand.
Well, because it used to be that Oakville had the higher taxes, right? They always had a higher mill rate. I
Right.
think at this point, I think we're going to beat Oakville
Yeah, and
at this point.
Mississauga always had
Yep.
traditionally a higher tax base, but they always had, quote unquote, better services
Yep.
than Toronto. And obviously, being a smaller city, they had to have a higher tax base to cover everything. But yeah, this is a punch to the gut for a lot of people to hear this news today.
I think so. And what we're kind of seeing in the market, I did some showings over between Christmas and New Year's, and then I did some after New Year's the last week. And what we've been seeing is there's actually buyers are starting to come out because booking showings, there's more and more appointment slots that are taken when we go through to look on how to book.
Hmm.
And I've now have been experiencing where showings are going back to back. So that before, when you had a showing, you were usually one out of the whole day to have a showing when the market was slow in the fall. And now there's more and more buyers, I think, coming out. But what's interesting is that with the offers. So I did an offer last week and this one was in Milton and we were looking at townhouses. So right around the $1 million mark. And their showings were booked, but there were maybe six townhouses. And out of the six that we saw, three actually got offers and nobody was in multiples. But it seems that the buyers are starting to come back and starting to move again.
Yeah, and then once again, I don't want to keep repeating kind of from our last video, but there is a cyclical portion to this. So when the holidays roll around, the weather gets a little bit colder, things do tend to slow down, and then right, you have this little uptick again. But once again, there's no normal anymore. We were
Mm-mm.
looking at the stats yesterday, and I'm going to be posting them on the LinkedIn. Um, and yeah, there was like an inversion. So the sales in December were actually higher than November. whereas usually November sales are higher because everyone's
Yep.
trying to get it done and then kind of cool down. So there is no normal anymore.
Yep.
There is no historical norm to point to. Yeah, it's anybody's guess. So if you know,
Well, and with interest rates, so my clients, the client I've been working with since December, right? We've been looking through the market trying to figure out what she wants to purchase. So her starting out rate that she got from her mortgage broker was 6.2% in December. Then when we got to the end of January, it went down to 5.9. She now called me yesterday, it's 5.62% that the bank
mhm,
is giving. So the rates are going down, even though they haven't lowered the Bank of Canada's interest rates yet.
yeah.
But it seems that the banks themselves are actually going down, which means it increases people's affordability. They can buy a little bit more.
Yeah, and this is a big psychological game that happens in real estate where FOMO, that phrase, fear of missing out. So when everybody's buying and it starts to push up those prices, then everybody figures I have to buy now or I won't be able to afford it because the prices keep going up. It takes, one news article talking negatively, and then it just seems the psychology shifts, and then everybody is sitting on the fence waiting for a few people to jump off, and then as soon as a few bidding wars happen,
Yep.
then it kind of starts this cycle all over again. The interest rate was paused. It looks like they're going to keep it
The
at this
same.
the
Well,
same.
Jan 24th is the announcement,
Right.
so we won't
So
know
there,
for a
but the
while.
rumors. So what I'm trying
Yep.
to get at is like, it's this the rumor mill, and like what's the narrative? So if the narrative is we're going to keep it and possibly start to reduce, then that's going to, encourage people to come out.
Yep.
Versus what we went through last year, which was another upgrade, another increase, another increase. So people just pull back and say, well, I got to wait. I
Yep.
can't do this, right?
Well, and also if we talk to any of the companies that work on sort of when listings are getting ready, so photographers, videographers, staging companies, like I went to book, we have a new townhouse listing coming up. So even to book the photographer and videographer, there's slots that are already booking where a few months ago those slots were wide open and you were
Mm.
able to kind of pick your time. So I think we are going to have an early spring market. But if the winter is relatively mild, I think we're going to go early. I think it'll be in January
Well, we
that
can
there'll be
hope
more
so.
listings.
Yeah, let's hope
Well,
so.
people have been waiting so long, right?
A lot of people have been sitting and waiting for a long time. Yeah, actually, that was one of the other stats from yesterday's office meeting was the number of listings versus the actual number of sales. So there were actually less properties available
Wow.
compared to last year, but
Wow.
we had more sales compared to last
Wow.
year in the same
Which
time
is
frame,
opposite.
which is opposite. So, like I said, everything's inverted, up is down, right?
Yeah.
Peace, love is war, and all that
Well,
stuff.
and you know what I encountered as well over the last couple of weeks with my client was escape clauses. So we haven't had escape clauses used in a very long time. So
Mm,
so I had two different properties where they're sold conditional. So that means there's a buyer put in an offer on the property, the sellers accepted it, but it's conditional upon the buyer selling their house or their townhouse or their
right,
condo.
right.
So what happens then is, depending how they're written, that seller has or that buyer has the first right of refusal. So, for example, the seller can still sell the house. They can be shown. A buyer can come to look at the property and then say, "Hey, I want to put an offer in," and then that triggers that clause. So then that
Correct.
seller has to tell the buyer that put in the offer with the escape clause, "Hey, you have 24 hours or 48 hours, whatever's in the clause,
To figure it
to
out.
figure it out and to be firm, or else your offer, we're going to decline your offer, and then the new person's going to come in."
Yeah.
So I haven't seen that in 12 years. I think I've seen that once before, and I had two last week that
Yeah,
we
no,
saw.
I've seen that actually a few times now as well. And typically that was something you would see kind of in the rural kind of
Yeah.
areas, not so much here in the city. Um, and actually, even last year on a condo where I approached the agent and I said, look, my client hasn't sold. In fact, we haven't even listed, but they like your unit. Would you even consider if I put in this offer conditional on us selling ours? And he said, yeah, if it's the right price, we'll consider it.
Yeah.
So, and that's for a condo in Toronto. So
Wow.
that's, yeah, there's a lot of changes, there's a lot of things happening for sure. I wanted to ask you a question regarding
Mhm.
Tressa. Have you had any dealings with any other agents and like putting in an offer? Have you done any of that in the last couple of weeks since Tressa?
I did. And what was funny, so I had to educate my client on Tressa, which it was very confusing for the buyer because all of a sudden we've been working together before Tressa started. And I have to say now, okay, these are all the new rules that are in place. So in one of them we were putting into her offer, I had a clause in there that said that she did not want any of her information from her offer being released with the exception of the irrevocable date of the offer. So because now a seller can choose to reveal any part of any offer outside of personal information
Hmm.
when we're going through an offer process.
Right.
So she did not want her information. So we had to go through that. And then when I spoke to the agent, I said to the agent, okay, so I have that clause in there. How are you handling the new TRESA rules? And he said to me, well, I don't really know very much about TRESA, so we're trying to figure it out. And I thought, but we're going through an offer process. So there's an impact that's actually happening. Like this is happening right
Yeah,
now.
it's
You
trial
can't
by
wait.
fire. Yeah.
Yeah. And then in the end, he called me back and said, okay, not only like he doesn't really know about TRESA very much. And this is an agent that has experience. It's not a newer agent who maybe wouldn't have as much experience. But he also said, by the way, I'm in multiple representation. So then I had to ask him, well, is it your office at the brokerage level? Are you in multiple representation, or are you a designated representative?
Mm-hmm.
So and then he said, no, I'm not. So then I said, okay, so if you're representing the buyer and the seller under these new TRESA rules, then you can't advise them either one now, because that's the interpretation of the rule that we've been learning.
Our advice to our clients and what we can advise them and the words that we can use changes, correct? So now, because they've introduced this new designated representative within that office representation, you're right. If he's now representing both sides, that now changes how he can advise them and what he can say to them, how much they can sell for, or how much they should sell for, or how much they should offer. That all changes. So it's scary that, and I understand why they made the changes. I do. Obviously, there's lots of bad apples or shady characters in every industry. It's not just in real estate. Every industry, you're always going to have a few people who are trying to circumvent the rules. But I think in this case, there's just a lot of confusion. There's a lot of confusion out there.
There is, and even when I told the agent, I said, "So you're not advising either client?" He said, "Well, no, I am." So and he said, "No, my brokerage said I could." So there's still tons of confusion out there. I know that our office is being pretty like strong about educating us, but
Yes.
we're even meeting separately to educate ourselves and watching videos and trainings, and it's not 100% clear what all the changes are. And I find too with other agents I've spoken to that a lot are not going to some of the sessions and are not attending trainings.
Clearly, there's going to be some people who are not going to follow the rules. Even, I mean, we had rules before they weren't following. Now they've created more rules. So if they weren't following those ones before, who's to say they're going to follow the new ones? And you're right, our office has been really good. Luik has always been on top of, and that's why we have such a successful, I think, brokerage, is because, our leadership team is very, very diligent in keeping us and making things available to us, webinars and training sessions. But once again, the whole implied representation came up again regarding buyers, and do you have to have this buyer representation agreement signed before you even show them one property? And
what does implied really mean?
So there's a 3-page breakdown on the RICO website. So the way I've always done it, an implied representation is like a verbal acknowledgement, handshake, that yes, I'm going to work with you, and yes, you're going to work with me, and we're good, and shake hands, and let's go out there and make this happen, without actually having to write that down. The problem then is under TRESA, it says that no services can be provided unless you have something in writing. So then the question is, how long does this implied representation last? A day, a week, a month, right? So a lot of gray area, unfortunately. I think it's going to be a lot of fake it till you make it.
I think so. And with the public, like I have a listing right now in Caledon, and I had a buyer call me on the listing. So I spoke to her and she wanted to go see the property. So I asked her if she was working with another realtor, and she said, no, I'm going to be representing myself. So I said to her, oh, do you know about self-representation? And she said, well, no, but I want to work with whoever has the listing. I'm going to work with them. They can draft the offer for me. So I said, have you heard of TRESA? And she said, no. And I said, well, how many showings have you gone on in the last month? And she said, this is in December. Oh, I've been like 6 or 7 different agents. I said, and no one spoke to you about TRESA and about self-representation? She said, no. So I was on the phone with her for 30 minutes trying to explain it. I sent her the link to RICO.
I was going to say, nobody gave her the info guide?
No, the 13-page info guide that nobody's reading? No. But I sent her the link to everything. So she said, okay, I'll call you back. So she goes through and I guess she looked at it, and then she calls back and she said, well, I don't really understand most of this. And she said, she's a smart businesswoman. And she said to me, I just want you to do the offer for me. And I said, well, actually, I can't under these rules. If you're self-representing, I can't do the offer. I said, you can do the offer on a napkin, a piece of paper. I said, or you can have your lawyer do it.
Right.
Yeah. And she said, well, how come no one else is telling me this? So then the conversation turns to, are you sure you know what you're talking about? And I'm telling her, no, that's why I sent you the link. And she said, but no one else is telling me.
Yeah.
So for the buyers, I mean, and sellers, but for buyers in particular who are used to just being able to go to a listing and speak to someone and be shown and maybe have them draft the offer,
Yeah.
it's very confusing.
Some muddy waters we got to swim through.
Yep.
Listen, thanks for checking in with us, and appreciate you watching our videos.
Story time.
Story time. So thanks for watching this long format, and yeah, thanks for checking in with us.
Thanks. And wish you all the best in 2024.
Absolutely.